Essex Police Emergency.
Hi there. I need police and a forensics team to my address, please.
What's happened?
My friend and I got into an altercation, and I'm the only one who came out alive.
Are you telling me you've killed somebody?
Yes.
Caterham, Surrey, a small town about an hour's drive from London. This is the town where a 14-year-old Breck Bidnner lived with his mother, Lauren Lefebvre, and his 3 younger siblings, a set of triplets. It was at age 14 that Breck began actively gaming after being invited into an online gaming group described as a virtual clubhouse by a friend from school. Breck's mother, Lauren, reported that while online with the group, his bedroom door was always open, so she could hear everything the kids would say online, and she never heard anything sinister. But one thing struck Lauren as being particularly odd. The thing that was really odd was that the ringmaster of the server Breck and his friends played on was someone unknown to the rest of the group, a young man by the name of Lewis Danes. This was striking because Breck knew all of the other players in real life, but nobody knew Lewis Danes. Lewis Danes claimed to be a 17-year-old computer engineer who ran a multi-million-pound company. He claimed to sometimes be located in New York and working for the US government. At other times, he claimed to be in Dubai or Syria. In Lauren's own words, to Breck, who still had his baby teeth and saw no evil in the world, Danes seemed very cool, very exciting. Slowly, Breck began communicating a lot more with Danes on both social media and the popular gaming conference call software, TeamSpeak. Around this time, Lauren began to notice that whenever she walked into Breck's room while he was gaming, he'd say, "My mom's come in," and Lewis would start chatting her up. Lauren would often ask Lewis why he wasn't off doing something with his friends on a Friday night, but Lewis would claim he was just too tired. These excuses did little to dissuade Lauren's growing worries, although even Lauren wouldn't realize just how justified she was in her concern until it was too late. Lewis's influence on Breck began to become very apparent to Lauren, who said that she would get a lot of Lewis says, such as, "Lewis says, I don't need to finish school as he can get me a Microsoft apprenticeship when I turn 16. Or Lewis says, I don't drink or smoke and do well in school, I should be allowed to game as long as I want." After a while, the once studious Breck stopped doing homework or chores, and it was increasingly difficult to get him offline. Lauren said that she would be telling Breck to get offline, and he'd literally have Dane's voice in his earphones telling him not to listen. Both of Breck's parents even offered to take him to meet Lewis in real life, but Lewis continually claimed to be too busy with, quote, important work. Frustrated, Lauren would start asking around for help about her situation. But she'd be met with responses like, "Oh, that's what boys do," or "My son was a gamer, he grew out of it." Lauren, rightfully, wouldn't accept any of these answers, and in December of 2013, she called the police. When looking into Lewis Danes, the information the police found on him validated every fear Lauren had. The police learned that Lewis Danes was the troubled child of divorced parents who was taken in by his grandmother and local authorities after they had abandoned him. They also discovered that, at the time, Lewis was 18 years old, unemployed, and living by himself in an Essex flat, where he bought server space and used it to game with teenage boys. The police would also discover that, although never charged, in 2011, Lewis was accused of possessing indecent images and raping a 15-year-old boy. But the truth, the sad truth, is that the police didn't actually find any of this information back then, because the police actually ignored Lauren and did not, in fact, look into Lewis Danes' background. According to Lauren, when calling the police to share her fears, the woman on the phone simply asked if Breck could just play on another website, or if Lauren herself could just ask Lewis not to contact Breck again. This is what makes the story very frustrating for me, because while this is a cautionary tale, Lauren didn't even need a cautionary tale to recognize, warning signs, and she tried actively to do things about it, but nobody around her seemed equipped to deal with a situation like this. Frustrated by the lack of help, Lauren took matters into her own hands. To protect her son, Lauren confiscated Breck's computer and organized a group meeting with Breck's father, another boy from the gaming group, and that boy's parents. Breck's parents shared their suspicions with the group. However, Lewis was already one step ahead. Having learned about this meeting, Lewis tried to convince Breck to record everything that was being said, and Breck did just that. From that moment on, Lewis knew that the parents were onto him, and so everything went underground as he decided to lay the foundation for the horrifying sequence of events that would soon unfold. Lewis would begin to tell Breck that he was ill and dying and too weak to run his company. Not wanting his company to go under, Lewis told Breck that he wanted to hand the company over to him as long as Breck would come over to his flat and learn the job. And in February 2014, as Breck was staying at his father's, he would inform him that he was headed to his friend Tom's to build a new server. Instead, however, Breck would go on to meet with Lewis Danes at his Essex flat, where the tables were turned completely on the 14-year-old. Since Lewis was now aware that Breck's family were suspicious of him, Lewis had emailed Breck a set of instructions for how he could convince his father to let him get out for the night of their meeting, including lying about going to stay over at a friend's house for the night. On the night of February 16th, after convincing his father that he was headed to a friend's place, Breck took a 30-mile taxi from his home in Caterham, Surrey, to meet Danes in person at his flat in Grays, Essex. This is the last point in time in which Breck Bebner was seen alive. After meeting face-to-face for the first time on that February evening, sometime during the span of their encounter, Breck was murdered. From evidence that was later collected, it was also found that shortly before Breck was killed, some sexual activity occurred. Recorded evidence would later also show that, shortly before their meeting, Lewis had bought duct tape, condoms, and syringes online. That same duct tape would be used to bind Breck by the wrists and ankles before Breck's throat was slit by a knife, causing him to die within seconds. But the horror didn't end there. Shortly after murdering Breck, Lewis Danes would take pictures of Breck's mutilated body and send them to two of his other online friends from their gaming group, photos which were ultimately leaked and circulated as news of his death broke. In fact, just as police were informing Breck's father of his son's murder, in the other room, Breck's 12-year-old sibling, Sebastian, would receive a text from her friend reading, "Is it true about your brother? If it's true, it's so sad."
You're telling me he is definitely dead?
Yes, I'm telling you he's definitely dead. I grabbed a knife and I stabbed him once in the back of the neck. I don't remember exactly what happened, but the fight ended with me cutting his throat.
When officers arrived at the scene of the crime, Breck's body was lying in Lewis's bedroom. All of Lewis's computer equipment had been submerged in water in an attempt to destroy the evidence, while Breck's clothes were later found in the trash outside of Lewis's flat. In the ensuing investigation, the police would come to learn that Lewis had been living alone since he was 16 and had developed disturbing interests online. He was obsessive and was fascinated by Syria, particularly a video of a beheading in Syria. Police say that Danes had been aiming to meet up with someone within the community between September 2013 and February 2014. Tragically, Breck became the one he decided on. Despite all of this, Lewis continued to maintain his innocence in Breck's death all the way up until his trial. However, just moments before, in Chelmsford Crown Court in Essex, Lewis decided to plead guilty for the murder of Breck Bebner. And on January 12, 2015, Lewis Danes was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 25 years for murder with sexual and sadistic intent. Lewis will be 44 before he is eligible for release. After the trial, Lauren Lefebvre sued both the Essex and Surrey police departments for mishandling the situation that ultimately led to the death of her son. An investigation by the Independent Police Complaints Commission into the police handling of the case found that the Surrey police mishandled Lefebvre's first call. Eventually, Lefebvre and Breck's father reached a settlement with the Surrey police.
I am heartbroken and lost without my Breck, and I will never be the same. So much of me died as well. My poor triplets lost not only their adored big brother, but also their mother. I want Breck's tragedy to help open the eyes